A return to Morrowind is quite literally the next chapter for Zenimax Online Studios' MMORPG, The Elder Scrolls Online. But unlike previous updates, which could be purchased with cash store currency called crowns, or were included with ESO's optional subscription service, ESO Plus, this update is more on par with a traditional MMO expansion, which ZOS has decided to call Chapters. For all purposes, ESO's Chapters and other MMO's expansions are identical, with one important difference. In ESO, the player is scaled to all game content, so ESO's Chapters are immediately available to players of all levels, including people new to the game. Traditionally, MMO expansions are only accessible to players at max level, hence the semantic name change of Chapters. But with this change to payment model comes the inevitable question of, is ESO Morrowind worth it? And what exactly makes ESO Morrowind worthy of being an expansion, chapter, instead of being part of the regular DLC cadence players are used to? That's what we hope to decipher in this video. Welcome back to Morrowind. One of the biggest arguments on the forums right now is how large is ESO Morrowind? This comes from two angles. The first is how big is ESO Morrowind compared to the 2002 release, The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. The second is how large is ESO Morrowind when compared to the other zones already in the game. Comparing The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind to ESO Morrowind is a bit subjective. This ranges from the observation that you can see the cantons of Vivec from Seyda-Neen in ESO to not being able to do so in the original Morrowind game, to which I present this visual evidence from 2002 as confirmation of that statement. But that seems to be more of a technology gap than a statement of fact, as adding Morrowind graphics extender to the original game also provides a view of Vivec from Seyda-Neen even in the 2002 game. A fair amount of the complaints about the size difference, if any, between ESO Morrowind and the original game seems to be remembering the original game through rose-tinted glasses. That is, we remember the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind fondly, and our memory may not quite remember things as they really were. For example, this is how I remember Air-Sea Battle on the Atari 2600. And this is what I actually played. One thing that certainly makes The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind seem larger is the abysmal walk-run speed of the original game. It was painfully slow. Man, speaking of remembering the game differently in my mind, yikes, that is not how I remember Morrowind at all. In truth, the original Morrowind map does not seem all that impressively large when you install the latest graphical enhancements to the old engine. When standing on top of Red Mountain, you can easily see the coastline in all four directions. Here is a real-time video of someone flying over the world map from the North Shore to Vivec City. While the map for ESO Morrowind is certainly done on at least a slightly smaller scale to the original, I feel comfortable saying that it is indeed not as small as some are making it out to be. So how does the size of ESO Morrowind zone compare to other zones already in the game? ZOS has touted it as the largest zone to date, but is it really? Let's find out. But first, a caveat. The PvP zone of Cyrodiil is certainly larger than any PvE zone in the game, including Morrowind. So the largest zone to date tagline should really read largest PvE zone to date. With that in mind, on the forums, Morrowind has been most often compared in size to Craglorn, which was released in two parts in updates 1 and 4, and Hrothgar, which was added in Update 8 and was the first PvE DLC zone after the buy-to-play conversion. The first bone of contention when comparing the maps is certainly going to be the fact that Red Mountain is not explorable space in ESO Morrowind. Most of it wasn't explorable in Elder Scrolls III Morrowind either. So with that in mind, and a huge assist from Reddit user Lonely Tank, who did all of the work, let's remove all the non-explorable space from all three maps. Admittedly, there are some additional unexplorable areas in each of the maps, but this gives us a very good approximation for all three. Using the same program that removed the unusable space, we can then count the pixels of explorable space in each map, which yields the following results. Vardenfell has just over 84,000 pixels, Craglorn has just over 66,000 pixels, and Hrothgar is pretty much right at 70,000 pixels. So in simply pixels of overworld explorable space, Vardenfell is 27% larger than Craglorn and 20.21% larger than Hrothgar. But that's not the whole story. Comparing maps comes down to the scale of each map. How do we determine that? For this mission, I got an assist from the add-on Map Coordinates, and here's what I did. I went into Vardenfell, took my starting XY coordinates, which are shown on the map screen, or /coords with the add-on installed, walked in one direction for 10 seconds, and stopped. I recorded the XY coordinates of my finish point and calculated the distance. I did this a couple of times and came out with an average of 1.4958 units. I did the same for Craglorn and got an average of 1.9348 units, and in Hrothgar I got 1.9026. The fact that I traversed less distance on the Vardenfell map in the same amount of time means the Vardenfell map is larger. In fact, it's 29.35% larger than Craglorn and 27.19% larger than Hrothgar. So what's the result of all this pixel counting and scale adjusting? The net result is that Vardenfell's adjusted pixel count becomes 108,986 when compared to Craglorn, and 107,170 when compared to Hrothgar. This makes the explorable overland space of Vardenfell 64.26% larger than Craglorn and 52.90% larger than Hrothgar. It is indeed by more than 50% larger than any PvE zone to date, and it looks gorgeous. But what good is all that explorable space if there is nothing to do there? In our next video, we will explore the content differences between ESO Morrowind and the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, as well as ESO Morrowind versus Hrothgar in other zones already in the game. Here's to early access, less than a week away, on May 22nd.